If I just give the final paragraph of the statement issued by PSC in June 24 and ask you, and then I'll ask you and Nadia in turn to deal with these questions. An incoming parliament and government should support the right of the Palestinian people to self-determination, including the right of Palestinian refugees to return to their homes as repeatedly affirmed by the UN General Assembly and Security Council. It should fully support an immediate ceasefire to end what the ICJ has accepted as a plausible case of genocide, oppose Israel's imposition of what has been defined by the Palestinian civil society alongside numerous human rights monitoring bodies, including Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch and B'Tselem as a system of apartheid, and support the full and consistent implementation of international law, including the prosecution of those responsible for war crimes. Do you agree with those aims, Baston?
I do, wholeheartedly.
And Nadia, you agree with those aims too?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
Should have been done yesterday.
In light of the above, Nadia, do you publicly commit to the following if elected as an MP, to publicly demand and actively work to ensure an immediate, complete and permanent ceasefire in Gaza?
Absolutely, yes.
And Baston, did you hear? You do. Okay. Baston, do you commit to stand up for the rights and dignity of the Palestinian refugees by supporting the immediate and full restoration of the UK funding to UNRWA and ensuring that it can fulfil its mandate?
Yes, wholeheartedly.
And
Yes.
Nadia also?
Absolutely, yes.
So Nadia, do you support a comprehensive two-way embargo on the trade in weapons, components and military technology with Israel to ensure that Britain and its citizens are not complicit in aiding and abetting crimes including genocide?
Absolutely, yes.
And Baston?
Yes.
Baston, do you support moves by the ICJ and the ICC to hold Israel to account for breaches of international humanitarian law and the outcomes of those processes, including by insisting that Britain must uphold any arrest warrants issued by the ICC?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay. And Nadia, do you support the suspension of the 2030 roadmap for UK-Israel bilateral relations and negotiations toward an enhanced trade agreement in response to the grave violations on international law and the immediate imposition of a ban on trade with illegal Israeli settlements?
Yes.
Baston, did you hear that question? Your answer is?
Yes. Yes, my answer is yes.
And finally, do you uphold the freedom to advocate for Palestinian rights through the democratic processes and in academic, cultural and educational spaces, including by defending the right to protest and opposing any attempt to prevent public bodies from divesting or choosing not to procure from companies shown to be complicit in Israel's violations of international law?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay. So they were the PSC questions. There are other questions now posed by members of the community, and I'm going to try and rattle through these in turn, and I'm sorry if they're brief, but this is probably the way to deal with this as it's coming up to 8 o'clock, and we've got about 45 minutes planned. I think I know the answer to from both of you to the first question. Would you insist that if Netanyahu lands on British soil, he should be immediately arrested for war crimes?
Yes, definitely.
Yes.
Okay. The second question, do you support the immediate UK recognition of a Palestinian state based on the 1967 lines, I think what that means, 1967 borders?
Yes.
Our party's stance on that has changed.
Okay.
We feel the two-state solution's dead. According to George Galloway and his former comrade Yasser Arafat, it should now be a one state, and it should be named, well, it's up to the Israelis and the Palestinians to judge the Holy Lands, either Israel-Palestine or Palestine-Israel. You cannot have a religious state in that area. You can't have it just for Jews, you can't have it just for Muslims, it is the Holy Lands. So the two-state solution is dead.
Right, I'm going to switch now to other subjects because this is the way the questions have fallen. The next question, how would you tackle child poverty in the UK? I'll ask Baston this first. Would you lift the 2-child benefit cap? And if so, how would you pay for it?
So yes, the issue has been, I think personally that we need to have a state of emergency for poverty. The Green Party has set out in clear details how we would fund the lifting. Sorry, somebody's saying they can't hear.
No. Can somebody not hear? I think Baston, we can hear you here. I'm not sure if somebody who's not present can't hear. Possibly they're on mute or they haven't tested their audio. I suggest you carry on.
Okay. Yes. So the Green Party has set out very clearly how we would.
Sorry. Baston, you've frozen. I'll come back to Baston, who's frozen at the moment. Nadia, would you like to answer that question? The question is, how would you tackle child poverty in the UK? Would you lift the two-child benefit cap, and if so, how would you pay for it?
Yeah, we would. We would lift the two-child benefit cap, because that affects the most poorest families in this country, who tend to have more than 2 children. So to put further financial pressure on them, it's not going to make the situation better. How we would fund it is by taxing the ultra-rich, the multi-billionaires, who have got through without paying much tax at all, through loopholes in our system. So that's how we would fund it.
Okay. Is Baston still frozen? He's disappeared from my screen, so I'm not sure where he is at the moment. While we're looking to get him back, Nadia, I'm going to ask you, what would you do about homelessness in Brent?
First, we have to create the housing. First, we'd have to create enough housing, social housing, for all those that require housing. At the moment, we don't have enough. We have enough apartment blocks being built in central Wembley, but for the ultra-rich, it's £400,000 for a one-bedroom flat. This isn't affordable for the poor, let alone the homeless. So there needs to be at least 1 million more apartments, social houses being built. And there needs to be a standard that you can't cram 5 people or children in 1 or 2 rooms. Human beings just can't live like that. And that affects everyone's mental health.
So I'm sorry that I think we're still missing Baston, and I'm not quite sure why that is, because he was frozen, but he's now not appearing on the screen as a participant.
Maybe he's restarting his computer.
Maybe he's rebooting. Yeah. I think Martin.
Yeah, I'm Baston's agent. Would you like me to step in on that one?
I think so. That would be good. So Martin, I'll repeat the question. What would you do about homelessness in Brent?
Yeah, it's a question of homelessness across the country as well. It used to be a state policy, really. The slogan is provide fairer green homes for all. We've got a programme of 150,000 new social homes a year, and we would end the so-called right to buy, which is actually reduces the number of council homes. We would empower local authorities to introduce rent controls so that we actually have a ceiling on the rent that can be charged, or in fact reduce it. We would end the landlord's ability to make no-fault evictions that they can do at the moment. We see those people out up in Brent Civic Centre with their suitcases and their kids in the foyer, and they're waiting to be rehoused. We'd introduce a fair greenhouse guarantee for warmer homes and safe homes that are properly insulated. And we would make access to public services, schools and GP surgeries and so on, a condition of building new developments. That's the main points of our agenda on housing. You said Brent, it applies to Brent as well.
Sure.
One of the issues that's just come up, Brent Council at their next cabinet meeting after the election is going to approve a policy that will basically tell people who are evicted that they should leave Brent with their children, their families, and seek private rented accommodation elsewhere in the country where rents are lower. There's an article on Wembley Matters about that.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just say
sorry.
something on that? So I found out recently, I do my research from the community, I have my Nextdoor app, and apparently the Brent Council leader, Mohammed Butt, his advice to the Brent homeless was to move out of an area and find somewhere else where rents are cheaper. And I've got the link here, and it's utterly disgusting. It's that a so-called socialist party like the Labour Party, who's supposed to look after the poor and the vulnerable, attacks the homeless in such a way.
That's exactly what Westminster did decades ago with Lady Porter. Basically, it's a form of gentrification.
Okay, Martin, I'm going to cut you off here because Baston, I think, is back now. Are you back, Baston? Or are you still connecting? Are you able to hear me, Baston? You're still connected. Okay, Martin, until Baston connects, I'll come back to you. I'm going to put the next question to Nadia. Nadia, do you think the railways and water companies should be nationalised, and if so, why?
Well, absolutely. I mean, it's cheaper for me to go to Spain than it is to go to Manchester by train. It needs to be nationalised. These companies have millions in profit. It's untrue. And why should the working class people or any common person in this country be penalised if they want to travel to see family or friends in other parts of the country? They shouldn't be. So this is why we require nationalisation, and nationalisation of our waterways. Well, I think at this point it's common sense. When we have sewage water entering our streams and our rivers, I mean, it's abhorrent that our nature and our country is being affected that way for private companies, for the rich businessmen. Privatisation doesn't work, and it only works with good regulation. And this is our viewpoint.
So, Martin or Baston, on behalf of the Greens, do you want to answer that question, whoever's able to answer it? I don't know whether Baston is now back or still connecting. I think he's still connecting. Martin, are you still there?
Yes, I'm here. Baston, can you hear us or not?
Apparently not, although... So I'm going to repeat the question. Should the railways and water companies be nationalised, and if so, why?
Yes. The rail companies probably have to be fairly gradual, in fact, because there's a railway network and the individual companies and so on. But yes, we want to bring those back into public ownership and have a proper nationalised integrated system. But we also want to have much lower fares. At the moment, companies are subsidised in order to get their profits. There would also need, though, to be an investment in railways themselves, into stock electrification and so on. With the utilities, definitely we've been campaigning on sewage in rivers and the extortionate prices and the lack of investment for a long, long time. They need to be brought back into public ownership. But there is also a case for nationalisation in energy and other things.
Okay, we'll come on to that if I can, without straying from it. So the question was really about railways and water.
Sorry.
All right.
Yes. Yeah. The thing about nationalisation as a concept is that it's probably better to think of public ownership, and that can take forms at a national level or at local level. So there's different ways of doing it. For example, TfL in London is public ownership on a London-wide basis.
Okay, fair enough. Nadia, do you think MPs should be free to support strike action, and do you agree with the junior doctors' strike?
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely, yeah. The healthcare service, I call them the health soldiers who helped protect our loved ones during the COVID days. I mean, all they got was a clap when they actually needed was a salary rise. They needed a help with their, cost of living. So yeah, I do generally support doctors, junior doctors on their strikes. I trust their thoughts, I trust their judgment, they're doctors. So yeah, I do.
So Martin, if Baston's not connected yet, would you like to answer that question? Should MPs be free?
I'll try. I'm struggling a bit here. My question was, can you just repeat
Sure.
it again?
Should MPs be free to support strike action, and do you agree with the junior doctors' strike?
Yeah, agree with junior doctors' strike. But in terms of policy, the Green Party's policy is to seek to settle that as soon as we can with money that was set aside via a wealth tax on the richest people in the country. We'd also work on getting an NHS dentist rule, because we know in Brent that it's often quite difficult to get an NHS dentist. We'd put 20 billion over this Parliament for hospital buildings and repairs, and would restore public health benefits. One of the big things is the NHS restoration bill. That's a bill that I think was put forward by Caroline Lucas with support from some Labour MPs like Clive Lewis and so on, to actually bring the remit of the National Health Service back to what it was at its foundation, and that would ensure no privatisation within the system and access for all.
Okay. So if I can tell you there, just coming to the last question, which is arising out of this, and you partly answered it. Nadia, given that the UK financial deficit means there will be £18 billion of cuts to services, how would you generate income, or how would the Workers' Party generate income to pay for services?
So I've mentioned this before, and it's about closing the loopholes for the very super rich, the multi-billionaires, and for those companies that don't hardly pay any tax because their expenditure exceeds their revenue. So they're expanding because they're buying more property, they're buying more places, so they've got the receipts and they don't pay the tax. And that has to change. It has to start from HMRC. The tax situation there, it's so bad to a point that you're, as a company, you can grow and grow, but you don't really have to pay that much tax. I don't think Bill Gates paid much last year. So that's how we're going to fund it. Not penalising those who are middle class or working class. I hate to use the word class, but in this day and age we still are, unfortunately, as recent times have proven. So we need to really look at the multi-billionaires who aren't paying much tax at all.
So Martin, before I ask you the same question, I mean, I can paraphrase your answer, I think, by saying that your answer to the question, how would you pay for this, is by the Green Party's policy on a wealth tax, because you covered that in the last answer. Is that correct?
That's correct, and there are other tax proposals as well. Taxes on stock exchange deals and things like that. And we'd be looking at long-term a land value tax. That's a tax on all the land that people own, which would obviously go to big landowners and so on, not somebody with a back garden or whatever. And that's something that there's a cross-party land value tax working group that would need a lot of working through. Eventually that would replace the council tax, which is regressive, and people in the higher band houses don't pay the same proportion as those on lower band